Well, it's finally that time of year again. Time to round up all the best shows from last year and see which ones stand at the top. Before we jump into the list proper, let's lay down some ground rules for what qualifies for my personal list. Firstly, it must be an anime series, so no movies or one-off OVAs will make this list. Mostly because it just takes so long for movies in the later half of the year to get subbed, and the big ones that were subtitled this year had already premiered in Japan last year, so it's just a giant mess that I don't really want to lay specific timelines for. Also, there just weren't many movies that appealed to me this year anyway, so I guess there's that. Second rule is that it must be a new anime series. If it's a sequel, prequel, or spin-off to an older anime that exists in the same continuity as the previous anime, it does not qualify. This list is meant to highlight the best new shows, and I don't want to overload it with a bunch of sequels to shows that people will have to catch up on several seasons of. If you do want to hear about my favorite sequels from the year, I'll be posting a vlog on my side channel, along with several other miscellaneous 2017 recaps. Lastly, the series must have finished airing in 2017, so unfortunately Ancient Magus Bride doesn't qualify, although it certainly would otherwise, because I don't want to rate a show before it's all wrapped up since it could very easily shit the bed in its second half. On the other hand, if the show started in 2016 and finished in 2017, it does qualify because it ended this year. Anyway, that's enough of the rules, so let's start off this list with some honorable mentions. Nora, Princess, and Stray Cat gets an honorable mention just for being a solid bite-sized chunk of entertainment. It's been harder and harder for me to find good TV shorts lately, but this one definitely worked for me with its blisteringly fast comedic pacing and pretty alright flash animation. It's still a bit cheap looking overall and does lose a bit of steam in its second half, but if you want to chill out for an hour with some solid comedy, I can definitely recommend it. Kemono Friends gets an honorable mention for somehow taking every bad idea for creating an anime and somehow making it fun to watch. A full CG series based on a defunct mobile game produced by a studio I've never even heard of sounds like a terrible idea, but it managed to craft a huge cast of endearing characters, a well-realized mystery plot, and some pretty impressive shot composition to keep me coming back for more. It still ends up dragging quite often throughout its run though, and it's hardly the best looking full CG series on this list, but I still recommend giving it a go for a very bizarre and unique anime experience. Juni Tyson gets an honorable mention because Nisio Isin being a pretentious asshole and shitting on an entire subgenre of action anime is always going to keep me interested. The series conveys some pretty bold ideas regarding the concept of battle royales, which you can check out in my own analytical video, and it manages to subvert said concept in a way that feels smart and interesting. Unfortunately, there's not much else about the series that I can vouch for, and there are plenty of much better Nisio anime from this year that you should watch first, so it's really only worth it if you enjoy analyzing meta storytelling. If you're a Nisio fanboy like myself, then I definitely recommend checking it out, but I can't really suggest it to anyone else. Now that the honorable mentions are out of the way, let's get to the main list. All of these are shows that I would definitely recommend watching without much reservation, and the genre balance seems to be pretty solid this year, so I can definitely say that there's something for pretty much everyone on this list. At number 20 is Interviews with Monster Girls, because cute monster girls plus well-timed comedy is an instant recipe for success, which will definitely be repeated later on in this list. Its decision to underplay its humor turned out to be a huge benefit in an industry landscape where shoving the comedy in the viewer's face has become the norm, and it lends to creating a much more subdued and relaxing atmosphere. It even has some solid dramatic moments later on that never get too overbearing or overly serious, and its message about coexistence and understanding doesn't feel overplayed or hammy. A1 Pictures' softer artwork further supports the quieter comedy, as does Masaru Yokoyama's OST. The light pastels combined with the uber cute character designs create an absolutely delightful experience that lets you just melt into the atmosphere that it conveys. If you're looking for something that's more toned down that still has a bit of substance to it, then give Interviews a shot. At number 19 is Armed Girls Machiavellianism, because sometimes a standard school battle shonen with mild harem elements can still manage to grab my attention. It's hard to describe exactly what it is about this series that makes it stand out amongst its peers, but having a protagonist that actually has strong opinions and doesn't get pushed around by everyone is certainly a big selling point. Nomura's brash and unapologetic attitude rides a fine line between irritating and endearing in a way that makes him feel much more realistic than I expected, and it makes the relationship relationships he forms with other students all the more interesting. While it would be true to say that this is Silverlink's best looking show this year with some solid fight choreography and memorable character designs, it's hardly one of their better looking shows period, as the general cinematography often feels a bit flat and uninteresting. Still, the overall aesthetic has this subdued sleekness to it that really sells me on this particular group of semi-superpowered high schoolers. This is also one of the few shows that I had the urge to rewatch immediately after finishing it, mostly because I just wanted to know what the fuck kind of convoluted gender politics message it's trying to preach. It's stupidly fun without sacrificing too much intelligence, so give it a go if that sounds like your thing. Number 18 goes to The Royal Tutor for being one of the few Pretty Boys shows that I could actually tolerate, let alone like enough to recommend. It's a series that doesn't rely entirely on the sex appeal of its main cast, but isn't entirely sexless either, and manages to craft a solid core group of main characters with fleshed out personalities. And as the title suggests, this show is very much committed to the idea of tutoring, and you can very clearly see the arcs that each character takes as the series goes on. Even the tutor himself manages to get some decent development in, though not as much as I had hoped. The series is let down a bit by the climax though, since it's pretty obvious where the story is going and the final episode is more cheesy than uplifting. Additionally, there's really nothing about its overall presentation that stands out. It has some adequate comedic timing and there's nothing really wrong with its animation, but the overall composition feels very flat and unengaging at times. Still, it's definitely a standout in its field and has made me the most open to the Pretty Boys genre that I've been in a very long time. So if cute boys doing cute things sounds like your speed, then here's another one for your list. At number 17 is Adam the Beginning for being the Astro Boy prequel that I never knew I wanted, but I'm so happy I have. Admittedly, the series has very little to do with Astro Boy at all, and instead uses the name recognition to explore some intriguing Ghost in the Shell-esque ideas about AI sentience, programmable humanity, and the nature of the soul. A106 proved to be a surprisingly well-realized character whose slow growth towards humanity had me on the edge of my seat every time he made a new revelation about himself, and the supporting cast around him makes for an even more entertaining watch with how many new perspectives they bring in. Unfortunately, most of the second half is bogged down by a generic tournament narrative that just ends up spinning its wheels and makes some of the more unruly characters feel even more irritating. However, the final episode makes it all worth it with one of the deepest, most intense dives into AI consciousness that I've ever seen. The animation is fairly solid with some bright and poppy color choices and distinctively Tezuka character designs updated for a more modern look, but it also gets a bit too CG heavy when there's a lot of action going on, and the constantly fluctuating quality of the OST still has me a bit torn. Overall, I'm very pleased with what I got out of this show despite being so severely disappointed by the previous Tezuka property revival, though I'd be hard pressed to say I want more since that final episode was so damn strong. Number 16 goes to Princess Principal for doing a story that felt totally out of left field considering the current genre climate and still managing to hit it out of the park. There are very few good spy thrillers in anime, but this one is definitely one of the best, and its engrossing episodic stories and gripping action are simply marvelous. I'm still kinda shocked by how much detail they poured into the main cast of this series. Each of the main girls feels unique and fleshed out enough for me to care about them, and yet the spy atmosphere still keeps part of them shrouded in mystery. As someone who generally doesn't like steampunk, the aesthetics of this particular steampunk setting are very much to my liking. There's something almost monolithic about the London cityscape that's intensely gratifying to view. However, I'm still not a fan of the post-Victorian / Edwardian costume designs, though this is a very minute detail. I'm also insanely happy that Yuki Kadra is finally back to making interesting soundtracks again after a string of generic thriller OSTs, which could very well be getting an analytical video from me in the future. And her unique blend of dark jazz, orchestra, and electronics is perfect for this series. There's nothing too thematically deep with Princess Principal, and the ending does feel a bit rushed, but as a straightforward spy thriller, it's definitely worth the thrill ride. Number 15 goes to World End because actually being a competently executed sci-fi light novel adaptation is, depressingly, something that's worthy of note nowadays. This show is a great example of how these kinds of stories should be and how to avoid overused cliches and bad writing. No stupidity, no misunderstandings, no obnoxious cast, no socially inept main characters, just a solid adventure story with an actual conclusion. The series also dabbles in themes of memory and family, and they're explored enough to resonate resonate emotionally with the audience. I legitimately cared about Willem and Catholi and watching them grow closer. Having a romance that actually turns into some kind of relationship, even if it isn't directly stated, is a huge step in the right direction. And you can check out my own video from a while back, as well as the Pedantic Romantics for more details. Admittedly, there are a few moments where it falls back into more standard tropes, but it's also very quick to add new ideas and keep things fresh. And the way it manages to shift between tense drama and relaxing slice of life is pretty remarkable. The animation isn't spectacular by any stretch, but it's mostly competent with some pretty hype action scenes and well-realized lighting. And the sheer vibrancy of the colors is definitely a plus. Throw in a Tatsuya Kato soundtrack that's actually interesting for once, and you've got yourself a solid anime. Number 14 goes to Scum's Wish for its serious and captivating presentation of a genre that I think gets much more hate than it deserves. Melodramas are the butt of the joke in pretty much all mediums, but when handled well with solid characterization, it can be a worthwhile venture. Rather than dance around the issue of sex like so many of its coyer contemporaries, Scum's Wish goes straight for the jugular and presents sex as rawly and intimately as TV broadcast will allow. Its cast of broken yet endearing characters kept me invested in their struggles despite me not really having any relation to the actual issues they were going through. At the same time, it uses a softer pastel-like presentation with a focus on contrast between bright and dull coloring to sell its themes of loneliness, inadequacy, and desire that its main cast of confused and desperate high schoolers are drowning in. Lurch's work on the animation is intense and filled with lust and other potent emotions, while also remaining somewhat tactful. And yet another Masaru Yokoyama OST filled with rolling piano melodies allows many key moments to soar without limits, as well as bask in the deepest pits of despair. If you want a solid introduction to anime melodramas, then Scum's Wish is a good place to start. Number 13 goes to Saga of Tanya the Evil, because with a premise like psycho-German lolly murders everything with magic in not World War I Europe while also trying to take revenge on God, you really just have to check it out on that alone. And the series definitely delivers on that promise in folds. Tanya's mindset of cutthroat elitism as she pushes her way to the top of the military hierarchy is just as sadistically thrilling as the ways that society and God push back against her in karmic retribution. And that conflict drives the series forward with unrelenting force and constantly kept me on the edge of my seat to see how things would turn out in the end, even if Tanya is a bit too overpowered. It even managed to do something fresh with the isekai concept by exploring how there can be some surprisingly cross-cultural understandings in regards to success and power. Despite a ton of mediocre CG, Studio Nut manages to hide most of it better than more veteran studios, and Tanya's sinister character design is striking and terrifying. I probably had more fun with this anime than any other show in the winter season short of Konosuba 2, so I definitely recommend giving this one a shot for some epic World War I extravagance. Number 12 goes to Alice and Zoroku for combining a lot of my niche interests in the slice of life genre all into one great package. Alice in Wonderland themed fantasy anime seems to have become its own subgenre recently, and this one is another great addition to the pile. Much like Flip Flappers from last year, Alice and Zoroku is abounding with creativity that will excite you, instill wonder, and break any constraints of reality in order to envelop you in its topsy-turvy storyline. The darker subtext of the series also gives it an unsettling vibe that constantly has you on the edge of your seat. Because Alice, Zoroku, and the other characters are so endearing and likable, this makes these moments and their eventual resolutions all the more satisfying. I've also been a huge sucker for mental development in child characters lately, and the way they present Alice and her confusion regarding her place in the world had me totally hooked. The cutesy character designs combined with contrasting sets of color palettes amp up all the emotions surrounding these characters, though I can hardly say this is one of JC Staff's better looking shows. There's quite a bit of dodgy CG, but it can be mostly overlooked. And Thomas strikes gold again with another quirky and off-kilter soundtrack. If elfin lead but less edgy and with better characters sounds appealing to you, check this one out right away. Number 11 goes to The King's Avatar, because apparently Chinese cartoons are a thing now, and despite Howliner Animation's constant failings, other studios can actually produce some pretty good ones. The series takes complete advantage of an untapped premise, competitive gaming, and explores it thoroughly, telling its story concisely and with tremendous amounts of attention paid to details about world building and realistic dialogue. Yizhui is one of the most compelling protagonists from the spring season due to his mix of confidence and humility. His borderline arrogant self-assuredness is incredibly pleasant to watch, and it's nice to see a character who talks big actually act big as well, while not feeling like a Gary Stu, since this guy's literally been doing this for over half his life. The cast surrounding him, both supporters and rivals, is great as well, and the way they mesh together to form a living world of gaming gives this series so much life. While the character designs are pretty strong, a lot of the animation can be a bit wonky. Shaky fight choreography and a ton of obvious CG are a bit annoying, though certainly not deal breakers, but the way that certain shots and characters move can feel a bit jarring, possibly because of artistic cultural differences between Chinese and Japanese productions. Still, this show was a huge shock simply because of its origins, and I'm anxiously looking forward to any projects coming out of this studio in the future. Well, we're halfway through this list now, but we'll have to take a short break to prep for the second half next week. So stay tuned for my top 10 anime of 2017. Special thanks to Jan Rogalski, Rourke Tenjoin, JJJ User, and all my other patrons for their generous support. If you'd like your name listed here as well, along with access to other content such as a Discord server and patron-exclusive videos, check out the link in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that little notification bell so you can stay up to date on all my latest content. Share this video around with people you think might be interested. Leave a comment below about what you thought and other topics you'd like me to cover in the future. Visit my vlogging channel for random topics that don't make it into my main channel content. Check out my written articles over at Digital Fox Media, and don't forget to follow me on Facebook and Twitter. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.